How's it going, guys? My name is Tavarish, and today is going to be a little bit of a different video. This is going to be the Sunday show. And the Sunday show is just going to be me talking about stuff that's on my mind and also answering a few of your questions. Now, I am not in my home state of Florida, well, rather my now home state of Florida. I'm in my previous home state of New Jersey because of Hurricane Irma and all that stuff. I'm pretty sure my cars are okay, but we'll see what happens when I get there later this week. And I will have a video for you about that. But right now, I just want to ramble a little bit, and hopefully you guys will come with me on this journey. And then I'm going to answer some of your questions that I've taken from Twitter and Facebook, and we're going to have a good time. Now, before we start with any of that, there's going to be some traffic. This is really off the cuff, and yeah, there's going to be cars whizzing by and people going by. It's not my quiet Florida environment, but whatever, beggars can't be choosers. I have to tell you about this car, and this car is looking quite small. In fact, the rear window is right here within arm's reach, and that's because it is the smallest car that I've ever driven. It is a 2009 Smart Fortwo, and I'm not sure what the trim model is. I'm sure they have different ones. I think Passion is one of them, and another one is, I don't know, Grapefruit, I don't know, something. But this car is quite unique in the fact that it's a two-seater, it's rear-wheel drive, rear engine, or maybe mid-engine, depending on how far back it's actually on the axle, so technically it's mid-engine, kind of like the MR2, but whatever. This car is it's interesting because it's so small it can basically park anywhere. And another reason why it's interesting is because I didn't buy it. Yeah, I'm usually apt to buy cars kind of sight unseen, and I didn't buy this car, but I did rent it. And I rented it from a place called Turo. And Turo, if you don't know what that is, it's like an Airbnb for cars. People with interesting cars rent them out to people that like interesting cars. If you'd like to try Turo for yourself, and I really would recommend it, then you can click the link below and you will get $25 off your first ride. And there are a lot of really interesting cars, and actually I'm going to be doing a lot of videos on interesting cars that I find with Turo in my neighborhood. I know you guys liked the video that I did with the S600. There's going to be a lot of those coming up in the next few weeks and months. But right now what I want to talk about is something that is on my mind, or has been on my mind for the last few months, and that is the Mark IV Toyota Supra. And the Toyota Supra is... If you don't know what the Toyota Supra is, then I suggest you Google it and, I don't know, Google what an automobile is, because that is sort of synonymous with car culture at this point. It is so ingrained in what people think modifying cars is, and I mean, it was the star car in the first Fast and Furious, and it's just gained popularity ever since then. But if you've been trying to find a good quality Supra for a decent price, then you're kind of out of luck in that respect, because the prices have just increased almost exponentially. Not actually exponentially, but it's just been stratospheric rise to the top. So a well-sorted Supra would set you back, let's say 10 years ago. It would have set you back around 20 grand, 25 grand, maybe 30 grand for the nicest one in the country. Now, the nicest one in the country is going to set you back around $100,000. And I think that's too much, because the Supra itself, when it was first launched, it was around 50 grand. And if you factor in for inflation, then that becomes like 75 to 80 grand now, which is an expensive car. But you have to also factor in the depreciation after the fact, and the fact that you can make a ton of power on that power plant. By the way, I am talking about the turbo model. That's a top spec 320 horsepower inline 6 twin turbo with a 6-speed manual transmission that can handle all sorts of power. And that is sort of the point of that car, because it could handle a lot of power. It could handle somewhere around 1,000 wheel horsepower on the stock block. I think that's the limit of where parts start to really disintegrate and break. But before then, I mean, that thing is just a powerhouse. The transmission can handle a ton of power. And I think that was the initial draw, because you could have a Supra for, let's say, 30 grand, and you can go head-to-head with Vipers if you put in about 10 grand worth of work, maybe new turbos, new fuel system, stuff like that. The car was always a really, really good bang for your buck in terms of performance and horsepower. But for $100,000, which is what some of the top-spec ones are selling for, I don't think that's the case, because you have a lot of competition in the used car market. I mean, You can get an Audi R8 V10 for around that price. You can get a used Gallardo. You can get a Viper and then put a twin turbo kit on it. Hell, you can get an Audi R8 V8 and put a twin turbo kit on it for that amount of money. And the only thing people are really paying for at this point is just nostalgia. And I'm not a fan of nostalgia tax. I don't like it when they put it on the E30 M3. I mean, E30 M3 is a good car, but I don't think it's $120,000 worth a car. I also don't happen to think the Acura NSX is that big of a deal when you look at how much it costs versus what you get in performance. So the Supra is a special case because a lot of people still want it. The prices are still going up, but I think they're plateauing a little bit. So what I would do if I wanted a good quality Supra, which is what I want. I do eventually want to find a Supra. I'd love to do a project on it. But I think the only recourse for me, which is to find a budget Supra, is to find one that needs a lot of work. And even the ones that need a lot of work are still selling in the mid-20s. You can maybe find them in the teens if they're real basket cases, but I think they're still out there. They made enough of them. I mean, they didn't make a lot of them. They made about 11,000 in the US, that is the naturally aspirated and the turbo versions. So they made enough where you can really, you can find some that need a lot of work. You can find some that had body work in the past, that are victims of the early 2000s styling and all those, you know, like kind of ghost flamed out or molded body kits, that sort of thing. And you can bring them back to stock, bring them back to presentable spec. But my advice for people that look at Toyota Supras and want something clean, want a clean example, and don't want to work on it is basically just wait a little bit. The prices should plateau out a little bit, and then you can get something, you can find the more true value of how much these things cost, because I don't see paying 50 grand for a Supra as being a good deal in any case. But let's say you're like me and you actually do want to find a Supra that needs a lot of work. Where do you go? I usually go on Craigslist. I do a nationwide search. I go on eBay, AutoTrader, that stuff. eBay and AutoTrader are less, you're less likely to find a really kind of haggard Supra. But on Craigslist, especially in larger markets, that's where you can get lucky. So California, Texas, Florida, even though Florida has a lot of right-hand drive ones that are selling for left-hand drive prices. You could also get lucky and check out Canadian eBay, because they do have right-hand drive examples, and the 25-year rule is going to apply in about a year for those 93 models. So if you find one for a good price and maybe stash it somewhere until you can bring it back home, then maybe that'll be a good deal for you. But you'll still have to deal with being on the other side of the car, which for some people it's interesting, some people it's cool. For me, I don't really want to deal with that, just because, you know, going through drive-thrus and going through ATMs and then cops pulling you over and asking about the legality, that's something I don't want to deal with. But if somebody wants just a Supra, like a bare bones Mark IV Supra, and also want to have the street cred that it's a right-hand drive, then you can go that route and you can save some money along the way. But for me, I think I just want like a rolling shell that hasn't been in any accidents, maybe a car that has been destined for track use, maybe something that started off as a project many years ago and never really got anywhere. There are some cars like that, and you can find those for between 10 and 20 grand, depending on if they run or not, depending on the engine that's in there. A lot of times you will have swaps that have like Aristo engines, Toyota Aristo, which is like the GS300 in Japan. You'll have Aristo swaps, you'll have GTE VVTi swaps. That'll be good, but most of them are going to be automatic. It's going to be very rare that you find a 6-speed that Getrag V160 6-speed. So if you do find one, that'll be that'll be basically a unicorn. But figure that you're going to have to swap that out. But I think a good budget for the Toyota Supra, if you want to fix one up, if you want to find one, I think all in for 25 grand you can find a turbo Supra with a manual. It doesn't have to be that V160 6-speed. There are different options. You can find a Getrag from BMW and put an adapter plate on it and basically use some M5 components, and that'll be basically the same thing. It'll handle a lot of power, and it'll be a 6-speed. It'll technically be a Getrag, so it'll be essentially the same experience that you'd get with a bone stock USDM setup. but 25 grand is basically what I want to spend on something like this, maybe in the future. So I am looking for a Supra. If you know of any Supras that are really in need of work, I know that Motion Auto TV, I know that guy has like 3 of them, and he just found them in various states of disrepair, and I think 2 of them are actually can be taken to running condition. Then I don't know how much he paid for them. Maybe he overpaid, maybe he got them for a steal, but they are out there. So yeah, that would be my ramble for today. All right, now it's time to take some questions from you guys. So first question is from Bobby Reed. This is on Twitter, and he says, "What is the oldest car you've owned?" The oldest car I've owned is just I had a 1975 Dodge Dart that I bought from my neighbor for like $100, or it might have been $300. I don't know, but it was a slant 6 4-door automatic. It was just a kind of pile of crap. But one of my friends, my barber, the guy who cuts my hair, guy who makes my hair look so sensual right now. He actually bought it from me because he wanted to do a project with a classic car, and he made it into a really nice looking car. He gave it a new paint job. He did some body work. He overhauled the engine. But I guess the person overhauling his engine wasn't too familiar with how that particular carburetor was set up, and something happened where I think the float got stuck, and it started overflowing fuel onto the exhaust manifold, because that's not a cross-flow head. It's basically the exhaust and intake are all on one side of the engine. So the intake leaked fuel all over the exhaust, and that started a fire, and the car was basically on fire when he went into the supermarket, and the car burned down, and that was the end of that car. But that is the oldest car I've owned, and the next oldest car, I think it was my 87 Porsche 944S, and I do have an 87 Porsche 944 Turbo right currently. So that is my oldest car. I do like old cars. I'm not against having a classic car. I just don't know too much about them. I'm not like a Freiberg or Finnegan that can tell you lots of stuff about carburetors and whatnot, but I'd love to learn, and I think that'll be a project coming up maybe later in the year, or later in 2018, because we are in 2017, it's almost over. All right, this one is a comment. I said, "Hey Freddie, not sure if you noticed or are aware, but you were featured in this morning's Hoonigans videos." Okay, that's cool. So all you guys from Hoonigans, hit me up. Let's do something fun. I'm down to do some tire smoke, and I'll come to you. How about that? Next question is from Anvar. Will you please consider your current MR2 as a parts car to another MR2 that you'll buy onwards? Okay. I've gotten this a lot, and no. This car is that's what it is. The reason why I don't want to consider this a parts car is because the street value of that 3S GTE with the 5-speed manual transmission is about $800. I bought the car for $1,000. So technically, I bought a 3S GTE with a $200 car around it. And if that works, that'll be fine for me. That's basically, I might need a parts car to get a bunch of parts onto my my basically rolling shell, but I don't think my car is going to be the parts car because it doesn't really have that many parts. And I think it'll be fun to do a series on that, just showing you guys what you can do with not a lot of money, and you can have a fun looking car and a fun driving car afterwards. All right, this next one is from Andrew Welker on Twitter, and he says, "What's the best used and fully depreciated value in a mid-size luxury SUV? I know enough to stay away from the BMW X5. BMW X5 sucks. It sucks in a lot of ways, but mainly in reliability. It looks really good. A few of my friends have this, have the X5, the original X5, and it did look very good, but it still had that engine that was just insanely unreliable. That's the M62 engine that was also in the 540, and some other BMWs of that era. But yeah, it was just a magnet for problems. But the best. Let's see. I remember I did have Tyler Hoover's from Hoover's Garage. I had his Porsche 944, his Porsche Cayenne Turbo, and I think for that amount of money, it's an insane value. That car is really fast, it's smooth, and it actually goes off-road relatively well. There's a decent amount of space. It's not the best looker. It is quite ugly. It hasn't aged very well. It is not like a fine wine. It's the opposite of a fine wine. It is an unfine wine. But that car is a very, very good value for what you get. It's a refined engine. It's relatively easy to work on. It's not like other VW and Audi products, meaning that it does suffer from some of those issues, like the vacuum hoses becoming brittle, but those can be easily replaced. It is a pretty decent runner, but I mean, the best bang for your buck is always going to be something cheap and American, like a Ford Expedition. You can get those for like $2,000 and they'll work forever. Maybe a Lincoln Navigator with all the air suspension changed out to a coilover suspension. That sort of thing is always a good bet. Not going to get the best gas mileage, but you're going to be comfortable. Might not look the best, but hey, you're going to be comfortable and it's going to be reliable. So I'd probably go for that. But if not, if you have a little more intestinal fortitude, then probably get a Porsche Cayenne Turbo, because that's probably what I would get. All right, this question is from Dark Flame on Twitter. What car did you regret buying? All of them. All right, in reality, the car that I regretted buying is a car that I wrote about on Jalopnik. It was called, at the time, it was a 2003 Cadillac CTS, and it wasn't a V, it was just like the regular 3.2 liter V6, and had an automatic transmission. I bought it for $1,500, and I think it had some, well, I bought it thinking that it had a crank position sensor issue because it wouldn't start. And it ended up being that the head needed to get replaced. So I replaced the head, I put everything on there, timing belt and all, replaced everything that needed to be replaced. And then I turned the car on, car turned on, had 0 oil pressure, and after 10 seconds, the engine seized. And I was crap out of luck. It was just a really bad deal for me. I spent about 2 to 3 weeks off and on working on that thing outside, replacing the head, replacing stuff like valves, and it was just a nightmare. But I ended up selling it for $1,500, but I did lose some money. I lost like $700 because I had to get a new head and new timing components and all that stuff. And yeah, that's something I'd never want to do. And the other car I regret buying is, again, a Cadillac. So I'm not having a lot of luck with Cadillacs. It was a 2002 Cadillac STS, and that had the North Star V8, but it was front-wheel drive, had about 300 horsepower, and had a 4-speed automatic, which was just complete dog crap. So yeah, that car needed a lot of work, and I ended up selling it for a loss. So that was basic. Those are the 2 cars I regret buying. Everything else is it was an experience. I mean, all the BMWs I've owned, I had a FD RX-7, that was a lot of fun. I actually regret selling that. I regret selling my 99 VR4 3000 GT that you guys have seen on this channel. And yeah, I mean, everything else, I mean, I kind of wish I kept in some respect, except for those 2 cars. All right, last question from Twitter is from this man called Michael Balaban. He says, "Why is my Yugo such trash?" Well, Michael, I don't know. You should have thought about that before saying that you're an automotive journalist, but you don't own a car. So, you know, maybe think about that maybe think about the things you say before you say them. How about that? All right, now let's take some questions from Facebook. You can ask me some questions on there, and I will answer them in my next video. That is facebook.com/AskTavarish. But the first one comes from Dana P. Tursak. And Dana says, "Is the cheap Benz manual swap still on? If so, where are you at in the part collecting stage?" Now, the manual swap for my SL55 is still on, and I'm very, very excited about that. But the parts are taking a little while to come in, because I'm ordering a custom-built, basically a custom-built transmission from Hungary, from a guy that you might know. His name is Amon Oliver, and I am working with him on that. He's a drifter out there, and he's making a basically like a bolt-in swap for the M113, M112, and also M120 Mercedes engines. So you V12 guys will have a solution for that. That's going to be really interesting, but that's coming in. I also have the pedal set. I will be modifying the pedal set from an SLK, so that's going to be coming up soon in a video. And the hardest part is going to be doing a basically fooling the computer into thinking that it's in neutral, that the transmission is in neutral, when in fact it's not there. So that I'm going to be doing with a thing called a Machina. And Machina was sent to me by, it's like this little OBD2 thing. Like it's a little OBD2 programmer that can intercept the CAN bus signal, and basically I can make my own program to tell the car whatever I want. So that's going to fool the car into thinking that it's in neutral or in drive or something like that. And hopefully we can get around the entire CAN bus issue, and the car should run like stock. But I didn't put that project on ice just because I got the MR2. I haven't postponed it. I'm actually going to do a coilover suspension swap. That's going to be the next video coming up in that series, and I'm really, really excited about that, because the ABC suspension on that car hasn't actually given me any issues just yet, but it can be really problematic. And it's not as low as I'd want the car to be. It's not as sporty as I want the car to be. It does float a lot, mainly because it doesn't have any sway bars, and it's relying on the hydraulic pressure to and the computers to make the car sit level. I don't really think that the driving experience is that great on the SL55. It does wallow a bit, and I want to make sure that that goes away forever, and I want to make it a little bit more sporty and also lighter, because I take out a lot of lines and fluid and pumps, and the shocks themselves weigh a ton. So making the car lighter is just going to make it that much better. So look out for that. Our next question from Facebook is from Andrew McCreary. He says, which Volvo car from any period would you buy and why? Now, a friend of mine and actually friends of mine from the site Shifting Lanes, they actually bought a Volvo V70R, and that's probably what I would buy. I'd probably buy V70 or S60R, and it's a inline 5 turbocharged. You can get them in manual, and they're all-wheel drive. It's basically an M3 killer. I'm not sure if it really kills an M3, but in the looks department, it looks a lot better. In the sound department, it is unlike anything that I've seen, and I really like the layout. I think it's an interesting car, and there's an interesting following. But you can get a lot of power out of that drivetrain, and out of the box, it's a really capable performer. So I'd probably get that. If not, I'd get an older, maybe like a 740, and then swap like a 1JZ or a 2JZ, because that is also a viable swap. And if you want to talk about sleeper, you can get 400 horsepower out of that thing with no problem, and you'll basically have a brick minivan. I mean like a brick station wagon rather. Yeah, I think that would be interesting. But other than that, I don't think... I did have a Volvo 240DL for basically a day before I sold it, and I did like the car, but I didn't mod it or anything. But I think a V70R, S60R, or maybe an older, like a 740, or a 750, or no, 850. That is probably what I'd get for a project car, and that's what I think you should get. But I don't think that's what you were asking, but that's what I would get. And our last question is from Amir FRT, Fert. I'm not sure if that's actually his last name, but whatever. He says, are you still pursuing YouTube as a main job, and is it still viable? Actually, I'm really, really grateful to you guys that you guys have been following me and subscribing and watching my videos, because of you, it's become a viable thing for me to have more of my time go to YouTube. I did make the announcement that I was going full-time on YouTube, and it had varying success. So full-time doesn't necessarily mean that I put out videos every day, even though I'd like to do that. It's just when you do everything yourself, and you have to do content creation and shooting and editing and all this stuff, and actually wrenching on cars, because I know that's what you guys like to do, that becomes very arduous. That becomes quite daunting. So I'd like to put out 3 to 4 videos a week ideally, and I think I will be doing that. I mean, Irma kind of screwed me up, because that was the plan for me moving forward. But as soon as I'm home, which should be in the next few days, then you guys will see more videos on that. But yeah, it has become, I mean, if you look at my Social Blade, it has, you know, the views and everything has gone up, and I've been getting consistent subscribers. So that is in large part, in 100%, your guys's. I'm an automotive journalist, by the way. It is 100% credit to everyone that's watching, so thank you very much for that. But yeah, I think it will be a viable career, and I'm not sure if there's going to be an exit strategy, because that is another concern of mine. If it's a viable career, at what point can I get out? At what point is enough enough? And I've been thinking about that. I don't really have an answer for that, but until now, well, up until now, I've been kind of, you know, going along and having these projects, and I think that's gonna happen for the foreseeable future because I love cars and I love making content about cars. So yeah, that's that. But I'm not going anywhere, and hopefully you're gonna see a lot more of me in the coming year. So that is it. I hope you guys like this impromptu video. It's just probably me rambling more than I should on topics that I don't really know too much about, but that's sort of the point of this entire channel. We learn together, and I like to talk with you, and I like to you know, kind of converse with my audience about all these things. So if you like this video, and I hope you do, then consider subscribing. Subscribe button is down below. Next to the subscribe button, that is a little bell. Hit that little bell for notifications. You guys get first dibs on my content, and makes you part of my notification squad that's growing day by day, and I appreciate you for that. But if you'd like to support my channel, you can buy one of my shirts. I'm actually not wearing one right now because my parents' washing machine is broken, and when I tried to fix it, I kind of screwed up my hand here. So yeah, I ended up having to buy them a new washing machine, and that's coming soon. But all I had was my Dirty Wrench Everyday shirts and my $8,900 SL shirt. So I actually didn't wear that, but you guys can get a brand new one. So link will be in the description below. If you'd like to contact me for any reason, you can do so at The Real Tavarish, that is Instagram and Twitter, and Ask Tavarish at Facebook. That's facebook.com/AskTavarish. AskTavarish@gmail.com is my email. I'm easy to reach, and I love when you guys ask me questions. I do read every single email. I might not get to it right away, but I'll do my best to get to it in a timely manner. So I'm not going to leave you on hold for months, but well, I mean, I hope I don't leave you on hold. If I've left anybody on hold for months, then I'm truly sorry. I don't mean to do that. But yeah, until next time, this is me telling you that you guys need to wrench every day, and life is too short to drive boring cars, and also ask me any questions that you want. So I'll see you next time.